started streaming all of these online as well so that anyone from the public can join. We need to maintain the public component of these hearings, so that's going now. The last thing I need to do here is just read through our hearing script. This basically just covers the procedure of the hearing, and then we'll jump right into the presentation of the applicant's case. So this is the November 17th, 2021 session of the zoning hearing examiner docket. My name is David Sturkey. I'm the zoning hearing examiner for the city of Cincinnati, and I'll preside over this hearing. The case before us today is case number ZHUV210012. The purpose of this hearing is to allow applicants and opposing parties to testify and to offer and refute evidence and testimony. This hearing will follow the rules found in the zoning code and the supplemental rules of the zoning hearing examiner. All testimony and evidence that an applicant or any opposing party wishes to offer must be presented at this hearing, unless a party has submitted evidence or testimony in the form of writing prior to this hearing. The hearing will proceed as follows. The applicant, the applicant's attorney, or the applicant's agent will first present the applicant's case. If there were anyone here from the public, they would then have an opportunity to speak after the applicant had presented its case. I'll give our zoning plans examiner, Trey Sheldon, an opportunity to provide any additional testimony in addition to his staff report, if he would like. In the event that any party testifies or offers argument in opposition to this application, the applicant will have an opportunity to respond to that and rebut that testimony that was offered in opposition. And then finally, the applicant will have an opportunity to make any closing statements. So for our purposes here today, I'll give Mr. Price and Mr. Dawkins an opportunity to tell me as much or as little as they would like about this application, why it's appropriate, why I should grant it. I'll then give Mr. Sheldon an opportunity to provide any additional testimony, again, on top of his staff report. You guys will then have an opportunity to respond to any of the comments from Mr. Sheldon and then make any closing statements. After all presentations have been made, I will close the hearing. Decisions will be maybe expected within 2 weeks. I may limit or exclude any testimony that I deem irrelevant or outside the scope of the application being considered. I may interrupt any speaker to ask questions or to make any comments. I may also refuse to consider hearsay testimony. That's generally evidence you want to introduce that consists of statements made by someone who's not present at this hearing. In the event of any technical difficulties or unforeseen circumstances with the video conferencing technology, we'll do our best to troubleshoot those on the fly, but to the extent there's some fatal defect with the tech that prevents us from meaningfully going forward with this hearing, I may continue or postpone this hearing at my discretion. Okay, last thing I need to do is just swear in all of our witnesses. So if you intend on providing any testimony here today, making any statements, asking any questions, doing anything other than just strictly observing this hearing, then you need to be sworn in. So if that is you, I'd ask you to raise your right hand. I need everyone to answer out loud. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
I do.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. All right. So who would like to start on the applicant side, Mr. Price or Mr. Dawkins?
I will. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Price, the floor is yours.
Yes, sir. So I've just taken the liberty of kind of writing down all of my thoughts as opposed to just speaking extemporaneously, just to be as succinct as I can. So I'm going to read through kind of, our position. So we have a belief and a presumption that the land use change and the zoning districts, which have been updated and occurring from the 90s until perhaps early 2000s on this Kellogg Avenue corridor, were intended primarily to eliminate unwanted junkyards and automobile holding facilities, which ideally would help to curtail blight and the abandonment of vehicles, discarded equipment, and debris. And so if that was the true intent of the land use control boards and revisions, then it was not necessarily intended to be a restriction to operating an auto repair, an auto mechanic, or an auto body facility. In fact, our proposed site sits right between two auto repair shops on either side. Mike's Auto Body Repair at 3924 Kellogg. Please note it was last transferred by a quitclaim deed on May the 2nd, 2005. And the other address on the other side is 4100 Kellogg, I believe also 4102 Kellogg. It's an unnamed company. There's no signage visible. The property is vested in the name of 4100 Kellogg Avenue LLC, And this property was transferred by general warranty deed on December 4th of 2015. The auditor site has both listed as commercial garages. Also, the site at 4100 Kellogg is clearly operating as an auto mechanic, auto salvage, and perhaps as an auto pick part operation. There are a plethora of junk cars that are on this site currently. Mr. Dawkins proposes to operate a top-notch auto repair facility that continues with the same excellent curb appeal of the Bill's Painting Company as it currently is constructed, with no proposed build-out, no renovations except new signage.
So, Mr.
We
Price.
believe this site is uniquely suited as
Price.
is.
Mr.
Yes.
Price, sorry to interrupt you. I just have a quick question before I forget.
Yes, sir.
So this is currently a paint shop?
It is a paint shop, yes, sir.
Okay, but
Now,
did you say that
I
on
don't
this site
believe
there's
that-
also junk cars?
No, that was on the 4100 Kellogg Avenue. So
Gotcha.
right next door. So
Next door, okay.
Yeah.
That's
So
it. I just
Bill's
want to make that
Painting Company-
clarification.
Okay, Bill's Painting Company really has a tremendous pride of ownership. If you reviewed the appraisal's report, you can see that, I mean, it looks specifically like an auto repair facility. And I'll kind of explain kind of the characteristics, but we believe we really only need new signage and it's turnkey. It's uniquely suited as is, having large vehicle bay doors, an existing auto lift, ample parking, fenced perimeter, and a proximity to other auto repair sites. And we want it to be the site of the new Dawkins Collision. We understand it operated as an auto repair facility at one time, albeit without proper permitting, as per Mr. Sheldon's report. The zoning of light manufacturing ML in a practical matter does not differ in layman's terms all that much in application, which, if I understand correctly, is intense industrial work of varying degree, very similar to auto repair work, auto body repair work. Please also note that there is barely a residential component in this corridor whatsoever. And even where there are residences, specifically behind Mike's Auto Repair and the 4100 LLC, which was described previously, there are other junkyards and various repair shops such as metal fabricating, commercial garages, blasting, painting, buffing of metal products, and there are several sites directly behind our proposed site that appear to be junkyards. Abandoned vehicles and junk, garbage, debris, literally is in the front yards of residences and storefronts. And I believe that's on McCullough, and I can't think of the other name of the street off the top of my head, but I might be able to circle back to that. But it's kind of the neighborhood just directly behind Kellogg. Where companies with ML designations are operating as permitted or non-conforming grandfather businesses, which we certainly understand, many are utilizing and storing paints, varnishes, lacquers, enamels, and allied products and other such chemicals, which includes a paint company, auto body, mechanic, repair shops, and even the Derrick Company at 4560 Kellogg, which advertises heat treating, blasting, and painting, which seems more complicated and more of an elaborate process than simple light manufacturing. But again, just a layman's kind of observation of the characteristics of the community. Again, we understand that many of these companies are permitted and are grandfathered into this corridor. However, we have reason to believe that several of these operations have not been as forthright as we have been to express our business intentions in order to comply with current zoning ordinances and land use provisions. And for an example, I saw several places that advertised a towing, that they did towing, which is completely fine and I'm sure is permittable there, but yet they have junk cars that are sitting there and haven't moved. We're a new business that wants to explore the same opportunity and comply with this variance, this use variance. This specific localized setting with this described environment with heavy industrialized and vehicle-centric atmosphere, all adjacent to our site, brings to the forefront the fact that this would indeed create an undue hardship to the current owner and to any prospective buyer, in my opinion. For example, if it could only be a retail establishment, given the circumstance and specific characteristics of the neighborhood I have described, all within 2 to 4 blocks surrounding our application site, it just would be out of place, again, in my opinion. Our proposed use of this site is to create a top-of-the-line body shop operation ran by an excellent entrepreneur, DeMarco Dawkins, who joins me today. He's a successful businessman who has been savvy with his investments and savings and has an incredible story, which offers hope and inspiration, we believe, to provide a valuable business model to the city and his future employees, as well as an advantageous tax base for the city. Please also note the seller and seller's agent described to Mr. Sheldon in either written or verbal expression that they had received multiple offers on this property. I won't deny that they perhaps have received other offers, but I wanted to clarify this contract that we are currently in possession of was not a multiple offer contract. In other words, this property has been on the market for at least 365 days. And perhaps before that, at least 200 days. Without the benefit of a closing, meaning that we were the only ones who provided proof of funds and the ability to close. In other words, other deals could have fallen through because of zoning, use, or mortgage financing. Further, this emphasizes in another way Mr. Dawkins' commitment level. He is prepared to go to closing on this site within 7 days and pay cash for it, demonstrating his belief in his business model and plan, as opposed to some other potential business person who could possibly get approved with contingencies and with a qualifying mortgage. Being in the business, as an example, I might say that it is not uncommon for someone else to only have to put 5% down or 10% down, and if the business doesn't work out, they can simply walk away without any kind of retribution. Mr. Dawkins is investing a large part of his life work into this project for it to be successful. And if you've reviewed the contract term, it's over $300,000 that he would be transferring at a successful closing. And I just might, before I conclude, just ask DeMarco, he might want to just kind of tell a little bit about his story or what he wants to do here.
Yeah, so I've been working with troubled teenagers since 2012. I currently, I was a teacher at Don High School and is in the city of Cincinnati, and I just see so many struggles with teenagers and them going towards the streets and things like that. But this will give them an opportunity the same way that it gave me an opportunity to have a trade, get a skill, and be a positive person in the city. But you know, I was one of those troubled teenagers as well, and I had opportunities that I didn't take. But this is an opportunity that I want to take to better the community, pay taxes, help out people in need. I'm just here to serve, and that's basically what I want to do. I just want to serve the city of Cincinnati.
Okay. Thank you.
In conclusion, our proposed use represents a general common sense approach, in our opinion, that we believe complies with the entire quarter and its makeup. There are numerous auto body and auto mechanic businesses nearby and even next door, and we understand that, you know, permitted uses are part of that, of course, and grandfathered and non-conforming uses. We believe, however, any reasonable research, whether it's city staff or a casual layman like myself, would be able to ascertain what the CAGES maps confirm. The overhead aerial photos of many addresses that there are several auto-related businesses and adjacent sites are replete with abandoned and junk vehicles. Dawkins Collision Repair will not be one of them. His will be an operation with a pride of ownership and excellent curb appeal, and will always remain in compliance with all the regulations of an appropriate use variance. If approved for this use variance, my client would agree to the conditions proposed by Trey Sheldon in which Mr. Dawkins and his counsel would, one, submit a site plan for parking and loading regulations, would two, submit a business plan describing the scope of the business, and would three, apply for any business permit or certificate of occupancy, which may be required. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. So, I don't want to get into this too much, but you're saying there is a purchase to contract, or a contract to purchase this property, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So he's not currently, that sale has not gone through yet?
That's correct. We have not consummated that, with this pending outcome.
Gotcha. Okay. And I think that purchase contract was included in the application, so I've seen that. And so this will strictly be then just a repair shop?
Yes, it'll be a body shop for cars.
Okay. And so, yeah, I mean, some of the I guess where do you store the vehicles when they come in and they're, after a crash or something?
Well, it's a gated fence in the back, and we are stored in the back or taken inside the building.
Okay. Because, a concern of mine would be, additional the additional visual impacts of seeing wrecked cars, for lack of a better word, throughout the parking lot. Do you think that'll be an issue?
No, I will definitely not have anything visible. Definitely have it in the back.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because let me take another look at the front of this. So the back is gated, you said?
Yes.
Okay. And is it like fencing or what is it?
Yes, it's fencing.
Okay.
There's a privacy fence on the very rear of the property, and perhaps on the, I guess that would be the west side. And then there is chain link. There's chain link on the other side.
Gotcha.
And Trey, I don't know if you have a view of that perhaps that you could share.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm on Google Maps now. I can see sort of the rear of the property and everything else. And I mean, this is from November 2020. Has there been significant updates since then?
I don't believe so, David. I mean, it's a chain link double gate, as you're seeing here, right into the back, and they do have it looks like some screen fence up around what's probably their garbage area there, or loading area. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see that. Let's see. Okay. All right, I think that may be all the questions that I have for now. Well, let me ask you a couple. So there are some standards that I need to go by. It sounds like you guys did have a chance to review Trey's staff report.
Yes.
Yeah. So there are a few standards that I need to sort of evaluate when I'm making this determination. And one of them is whether the property can be put to any economically viable use under any of the permitted uses in the zoning district. And so is this property economically viable to be used as something else? And if not, is there any evidence or any testimony to demonstrate that it's not?
Well, I mean, I would, it would probably be irresponsible for me to say that there's no other use that you could put this site to use. I just, as I demonstrated I felt like I demonstrated in my testimony, was that sitting between two auto body shops already and having a industrial element there already, to me, it seems out of place for a retail site to be a part of that corridor. Could it be used for that? Yeah, I mentioned to DeMarco, I could see a vape shop, or I could see something like that being something that somebody could easily, with the current zoning code, do. I just think that it is a hardship to some extent to the seller, the current owner, to be able to put this at its maximum use, which to me looks like, a body shop.
Yeah. So tell me again about just briefly about the history. So this was an auto body repair shop for some time.
I believe only 2 years. Trey had pointed out in a couple of different correspondence that whoever had operated as an auto repair shop was definitely not permitted to do so. So I don't know when that began and when that ended. But even currently, the Bill's Painting Shop, which would be a permitted, I guess, a permittable use, I don't think that ever went through permits either.
Okay.
Is that correct, Trey?
That's correct. I mean, so it's technically not legally non-conforming even as to that. It's a permittable use, David, for right now, because the guy's a commercial painter, and would if you see an aerial in cages or whatever, he'd keep his ladder trucks, primarily trucks in the back. He'd keep them that had ladders affixed to it, extension ladders essentially to do commercial painting, and so on. But he did not get permits for that. But this all started with a request for a zoning verification letter, which caused me to research it, which often helps the individual to verify that something's a non-conforming use. And in this case, I couldn't come to that conclusion because the former painting, the former auto body use, and it's noted in my staff report, was there for a couple of years, and then it became Bill's Painting. Basically the offices for commercial offices for his painting business, and essentially, if there had been a legal non-conforming use, an abandonment would have happened, basically. So that part, Mr. Price and I have an understanding that that's kind of pretty much what went on here. Even though they didn't get permits to have it be this use, they functionally abandoned it, whatever use it was in the past. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And maybe I'm judging a book by its cover, but you look at this building, it has motor oil signs all over it, garage doors. Are there lifts inside?
There was a lift that was,
Lift.
yeah, there is a lift that was installed at some point. The current owner would actually use that to put their supplies and stuff on top of when there was flooding. This is an area in a floodplain zone, in a flood zone, and they actually used it to put 1-inch plywood on top of it. The owner, Miss Lyons, was explaining that to me, and they'd lift up with it.
The history would indicate that I agree with Mr. Price that it's hard to say without a doubt that there isn't some other economically viable use, but that the only use that appears to have, that the building has ever been used for is for either auto body or paint, which is also not compliant or not a permitted use, right?
Well, commercial painting, he would paint buildings and so on. So that is a permitted use. It's his offices, or the Bill's Painting would be a permitted use. He just didn't get building permits for it.
Okay.
But I do agree. When I look back in the permitting history, David, I've kind of spelled it out. It was originally permitted. An addition was done to this building. Only a part of it, original part, the back of it exists, and they put all the rolling doors in and stuff as part of a auto parts distribution thing. So I guess before your Pep Boys and O'Reilly days, back in the 70s and 80s, I think this was like in the late 70s or early 80s that the permit was done. There was a large addition put onto the original building, and these rolling doors were put in. I presume, since on their use at the time, they declared it an auto parts distribution center, not auto repair, but auto parts distribution. I imagine that they simply stored parts in there, like almost like a wholesale kind of thing, and probably then distributed to, individual little auto repair business people such as Mr. Dawkins, right? They probably stored auto parts in there, and then when somebody needed a muffler or whatever, they'd go deliver it, or somebody, come and pick it up. So I imagine they catered to. That's the only thing we could determine from the permits, because you have to get a certificate of occupancy when you get a building permit. That's what was on it from back then. So I think at some point during the intervening time, I could find at least one instance where it was used as an auto repair shop, and I believe that's probably when the lift was installed then, without permits. But there's no question it is there. And I'm glad that Mr. Price, he, by the way, you did an excellent and very succinct job. I wish everybody, I'm sure David does as well, I wish everybody would present that well. But I'd explained to him when reviewing my staff report that it was very important for him to talk to the not only the surrounding neighborhood, but also that economic viability test. And they are the person that has the contract to purchase this. And I do agree with him. The building is unique insofar as it lends itself to that use. I haven't argued to that. The only part I couldn't get past without further evidence, which he may have satisfied for you, was that first prong of the test, simply because it was used as a permitted, a commercial painting business in the intervening, 5-year period or 6 years since the Lyons family has owned it. And that is a permitted use. You can have the offices or contractor facility for a commercial painter there, and it's a permitted use. So I just couldn't get past that without further evidence, which he may have presented today to you. So, and I truly don't think that if it's run properly and under the conditions that we enumerated there, and that Mr. Price repeated, I think if it's run properly, it will have no adverse effects on any of the surrounding properties or landowners. If it's run as a tight ship, I don't think it'll be a problem. I just couldn't get past the first prong of the test without further evidence, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. Anything else, Trey?
No, not unless if you have questions. So that's kind of the history of this thing. And unfortunately, it's kind of passed along without anybody ever getting proper permitting since like the 80s. So I couldn't even. It was tough to put even the ownership chain together, because it looks like whoever owned it was probably just leasing it out to be used for whatever use along the way, right? So it wasn't owner occupied like it would be with Mr. Dawkins. And I do agree with Mr. Price that matters a lot. If somebody owns something lock, stock, and barrel, and they take pride in it, their name's on it, that's different than somebody just making a buck to lease a place out and they're using it for whatever purpose, because the person's not as answerable when they don't have an ownership stake. So I think that that's a positive for them.
Okay. Thanks, Trey. All right. So, Mr. Price, Mr. Dawkins, anything else you'd like to tell me about this project, or any response to any of my questions or Trey's questions on this?
No, sir, not for me.
Okay.
The other point I would like to raise, David, is that while on my staff report, I referenced, I had no idea. They've been kind of hot and cold with the owner and the owner's real estate agent. I had no idea whether they would be present today or not, because they've been kind of back and forth, and I'm sure it's been that way with Mr. Price some. I did want to note that some of what I spoke to in conversations with them, I had hoped that at least they'd be able to verify some of this, what they had or hadn't done, and speak to it without any kind of hearsay component. I'm just saying that from the purpose of my staff report. I thought that they would be present. They were not. So, I couldn't speak to any conversation I had with them, because obviously that would be, under legal terms, that'd be hearsay. So I just wanted to cover that. So part of what I wrote in my staff report, if they're not here to back it up, you'd be within your rights to strike that from consideration, because I, what I mean? It was based on verbal conversations I had with the folks. So just letting you know that.
Gotcha. Thanks, Trey. I appreciate that. And thanks for your work on the staff report. So yeah, let's see. And I'm not, frankly, if there's a contract to purchase, that's as far as I go when it comes to whether I approve these use variances or not. and there appears to be one. And so that satisfies that standard in my mind. And as I look at this, you know, I'm very familiar with this neighborhood. I'm looking at the street view on Google right now, but I'm very familiar with this neighborhood. I've spent a lot of time over here. This seems entirely consistent with the development patterns and the land use patterns of this area. And while I do, you know, I do struggle a little bit with that first prong about no other economically viable use. I feel like it would be impractical to strictly apply that here, just based on the surrounding neighborhood and what I'm seeing over there. And I also think it would be unfair to sort of punish Mr. Dawkins for actually going through the process of doing this the right way and going through the use variance process, unlike the predecessors on this property. And so for those reasons, I'm going to grant this. I'm going to approve this application. I am going to take a closer look at the proposed conditions. I know that Mr. Dawkins, you said that you don't have a problem with complying with these. I just want to, so let me back up. What I need to do is actually go back and write a formal decision approving this application. That's usually what takes the 2 weeks, is just putting all of the findings in writing. And so I'm going to do that. As soon as I have that completed, I put it into a PDF and I email it to everyone in the hearing. And so as soon as that's done, you can start working with Mr. Sheldon and our zoning department to get the necessary permitting. And I will note in that decision what the conditions of the approval are. And there will be some or all of the conditions that have been recommended by Mr. Sheldon on approval. And so, yeah, any questions about anything I just said?
Oh, thank you so much. Very, very grateful for your time and efforts.
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Guys, one quick thing. You're not in for actually permitting right now, obviously, because whatever you do, Mr. Dawkins, after the decision comes back, once that's done, I'll be glad to work with you. Mr. Price has my contact information, so I could work with you on determining whether you're doing any modifications. You could talk with a building plan examiner as well. If you're doing any modifications to the building that would require a building permit, then you would need to pursue that. Permits for signage are separate. So if you hook up with a sign professional, please loop me in on that, and I'll be glad to advise as to what the limits are of what you can and can't do as far as signage goes. This place has a lot of signs all over the front of the building right now that frankly are not compliant. You can't put signs all over the place, but we'll work through that. And just to note, if you do not need to do major modifications to the building, that would require a permit, you still need a certificate of occupancy. That's something that prior predecessors have not done. So you do need to do that properly. Really, even for tax purposes and other things, it should have been done for the prior people. And I can't speak to why they did or didn't, but I know that you'll do the right thing here and go through that process. So I'm here to help you on through with that building permit process. Do note that there is an expiration period to these decisions. So I imagine you'll get on this right away, but you need to act upon it within, David, it's 2 years. Is that correct?
2 years from the date the decision is issued, you'll need to get the permitting.
Yeah.
So
We'll definitely.
Okay. Great. So yeah, if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to reach out to myself or Mr. Sheldon. And we'll be happy to answer those. Or if you'd like a status update on the decision, like I said, I email those out. That's been the fastest way to get it to you guys. Is email okay for each of you?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Okay, great. So again, I'll email that out as soon as it's done. That will include at the bottom any necessary conditions. And yeah, I think that's it. Any other questions, guys?
Oh, no, thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thanks for your time and your testimony. Mr. Dawkins, good luck with the business.
All right, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Sheriff.